Good morning, everybody. Meteorologist Mike Linden here, coming at you live from the MyRadar studio here in Orlando, Florida. It is Friday. What a week it has been. Of course, it will go down as a week in history with Hurricane Laura making landfall as a Category 4 major hurricane along the southern coastline of Louisiana. Before we get to speaking with MyRadar Storm Chaser Aaron Jayjack, just a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of the screen here, you should see our social media information. Be sure to follow us everywhere. And of course, if you are not subscribed to the MyRadar YouTube channel, what are you doing? Go to youtube.com/myradar, click on that subscribe button, and of course, remember to turn on the notifications by clicking that little bell. That way you always know whenever we go live, whenever we drop a new video, and really you're just up to date on all things MyRadar. Of course, if you are watching as well on our social media platforms, get involved with us, leave us a comment, especially during this live interview. This will be your opportunity to ask a real live storm chaser, one that just went through a major hurricane. We really can ask him anything we want to, and we will take your questions over the course of the interview. Now, before we get started, I wanted to show you what is currently going on with Laura. So let's take a look here at the MyRadar app here. I've got it pulled up next to me, and we've got the hurricane tracker layer turned on. Oh, we got to jump to the MyRadar app. There we go. Give me just one moment here. Looks like we lost our connection to the app using an iPad in our studio here. It just needs to connect to it. Either way, Matt, if you want to pull up next. Gotta love technology, folks. That's how it always happens, right? Always when you're trying to rely on it. There we go. I think it's connected there, Matt. Big shout out to Matt and Damien, the guys behind the scenes here. Anytime you see anything MyRadar, they are the ones that are responsible for everything. So, Matt, you should have it now. Boom, there it is. All right, so here's looking at what is at least left of Laura, and if we tap on that little dot there, we can get all the information. It is currently a tropical depression with wind speeds at 30 miles per hour. The pressure has really risen all the way up to 1,001 millibars there, moving at about 20 miles per hour. And the center of it is somewhat over Memphis, Tennessee, and it will continue to track its way east, going through almost the entire state of Kentucky, pushing through the Lexington, Kentucky area. Big shout out to the Wildcats and BBN, and pushing eastward into West Virginia, as well as into Virginia, the nation's capital of Washington, D.C., Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey. It's going to hit a lot of land on its way out there before eventually working its way right up the Atlantic coast and working its way out to sea. So we've still got a ways to go here, but the cool thing about the MyRadar app, for many reasons, you can actually see with the hurricane layer turned on, everything that happened along its path, right? So you can see Laura entering the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 1 hurricane, strengthening to a 2, a 3, and then look how long it spent as a Category 4 on its final approach there before making landfall right here on the southwestern coastline of Louisiana. The National Hurricane Center officially saying landfall occurred at Cameron, Louisiana, and it is actually still storming over the Lake Charles area. You can see all of those rain bands coming in behind Laura that continue to make their way on land, keeping the rain threat and the flash flooding threat up as well. Now, before again we get to Aaron, I want to show you some of the video that he sent into us yesterday. He spent his evening, as we'll talk about, right on the coastline there. This video actually comes to us from Sulphur, Louisiana, as well as in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So Matt, if you want to take that video here, we can show you guys. We're going to start with the drone shot here, and I'm going to show you a view from up above here. You can tell that it somewhat looks fairly tame, but as Aaron is going to tell you here soon, it was anything but tame, especially dealing with those incredibly strong Category 4 winds as they worked their way inland here. But all in all, the biggest threat from Laura was going to always be that storm surge, 11 to 13 feet of which was expected along the southwestern Louisiana coastline here. And of course, let alone the storm surge, just the damage alone that came with those high winds. Matt, if you want to pull up that video from Lake Charles of the Capital One Tower there with the windows blown out, that's kind of been an image that has been shared all across social media. If you were following us on Twitter and Facebook, you definitely saw this video. But look at this high rise here, the Capital One Tower in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I mean, just look at the windows there. Each little one there you can see just blown out from those incredibly strong winds that certainly did a number on other, let alone Lake Charles, but right there along the southwestern coastline of the state. There was a local television station that actually lost their communications tower, and then the National Hurricane Center, or National Weather Service office, in Lake Charles, Louisiana, lost their Doppler radar. It was completely blown away. Wild stuff. And Aaron was there for all of it. So I think now is the time to bring in the MyRadar Storm Chaser, Aaron Jayjack. I've just got to switch my headphones over here so we can hear Aaron, just so I can talk to him. And he will be joining us here in just a moment. As soon as he's on camera, we will talk to the man himself. And there he is, live from his hotel room. Aaron, you are not in Louisiana at the moment, correct?
Yeah, correct. I had to get out of there. It was my hotel room. I had a hotel in Sulphur, and it says the hurricane came ashore. The roof started ripping apart and leaking water in, and fortunately the roof never came off, but the water continued to pour into the hotel room there. And about 5 a.m. I grabbed all my stuff out of the fourth floor of the hotel room there and evacuated it down to my somewhat damaged Subaru. I had a window blowout and a spot where I had hit a deer last year, had taken some damage.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that actually got ripped off and busted out my fog light, and so lots of scrapes and bumps on the Subaru, but I'm totally fine. Nothing happened to me. I played it safe. Wish I'd done a little bit better job of protecting the Subaru, but lessons learned there. I was too focused on thinking about my plan of what shot I was going to get when I got in that eye. So I got out of Louisiana after I shot some of that damage footage you just looked at in Lake Charles. I actually tried to go to Baton Rouge first to get a hotel there, and try to go to go to the Subaru dealer and Apple store, but no hotels there. So then I started driving north towards Shreveport and Dallas area. And not until I got into Marshall, Texas, that's where I'm at now, was I able to find a hotel room.
Oh, man, talk about a busy 24 hours. So let's rewind, and we're going to walk through some things, and we'll take it step by step here. So you arrived in Louisiana late Wednesday, and what were the conditions like as Laura begun to make its final approach? What did you notice? What did you feel? What did you see?
Yeah, so on Wednesday, I actually got there the day before. I think it was Tuesday night I got there, and then I had all day Wednesday to kind of scout and figure out where I wanted to hone in, where I wanted to intercept the storm at. But as one of the weird, on the backs or on the front side of these storms, you get a lot of sinking air, and just a couple hours before that a hurricane came ashore, had a most beautiful sunset there in Sulphur, Louisiana. Could barely tell there was a hurricane coming. It was very calm, nice sunset, a little bit of a rain. But then off to the southeast, you could see the dark, ominous outer edges of the hurricane as it started to make its way to shore. So that first couple of hours there before, that was probably about, sunset was about 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. or so. So that's about 4 hours, I think, before I started actually feeling the first effects. And it was fast. I mean, it was a lot of times you get the hurricane force winds and the tropical storm force winds, and they're battering. Basically, the tropical storm force winds seem to usually in past hurricanes, they come in way in advance and they last quite a while. And this one, it wasn't the case. It ramped up fast. It went from tropical storm force to hurricane force within an hour, and then within a few hours after that, I was in the worst in the eye wall itself.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking the Gulf of Mexico there in terms of what can happen with rapid intensification. I mean, you look back to a couple of years ago with Hurricane Michael that rode the western coastline of Florida, eventually, of course, making landfall in the panhandle of Florida, just rapidly gaining steam there and getting stronger. And we were talking about, when it comes to Gulf Coast hurricanes, specifically Louisiana, Katrina, of course, everyone remembers as a Category 5 storm, but it actually made landfall as a 3. Laura got strengthened to a 4 and made landfall as such. It just continued to become stronger. So for you there, right along the coastline, when that eye wall started to come inland, of course, very early in the morning, what did that feel like? I mean, we're talking some very strong, intense winds. It's certainly something I would imagine you don't experience every day.
Oh yeah, I mean it's and not only are they intense winds, but it's long duration, right? It's a continual thing. And one of the weird things you'll notice in hurricanes is those strong winds. They come in batches, like in pulses. They pulse in, and you'll get a real strong rush for 10 to 15 minutes where it's just blowing really hard. And then it'll drop back a little bit. I think those are likely those mesovortices wrapping around inside that eye wall. Each little mesovortice comes through, that's where the strongest winds pick up. And so it's the moans and the groans. That's usually the first sign that you can tell that you're in a hurricane force winds, is the electrical grid starts moaning and groaning, and the wind groaning, and the whistling through everything, and you start seeing the power flashes. And we had that going on with the power flashes. It didn't take long for the power to get taken out in this one. It was, from the first power flash I saw till their power was out, it looked like everywhere was maybe like a half an hour to 45 minutes. So the power grid didn't last long. And then shortly thereafter, the cell towers go down. And I do carry 2 cell service. I have a phone with me that's AT&T, and then I have my mobile hotspot that's Verizon. And unfortunately, my AT&T phone got drenched in rain, and it stopped working. And I lost service there. And then my Verizon hotspot, Verizon service went down. There was no Verizon service where I was located at there in Sulphur. And so really the only data I had at that point is I keep a Kestrel weather meter on me. And knowing that what the hurricane hunters had been tracking as the lowest pressure, I think they were somewhere around in the 940s or so that they had detected. I knew that I wasn't gonna be in the eye until I got close to that 940 millibar data rating. So I watched that. Of course, you're hearing the winds, and finally got down to that reading around to the 940. I think a 948 was the lowest that I had seen on my Kestrel, but I wasn't watching it the whole time. I just happened to glance down when I thought we were in the eye. And then that eye, it lasted. The eye wall, the inner eye wall, was very shocking. There was other chasers there with me, and we were all commenting on how we should be in the eye at this point, because other chasers there had also lost service, but they had the last radar image that they had seen of our location. I mean, we were on the cusp of that eye, and then it seemed to take another 20, 30 minutes before we actually got to that calm part of the eye. And again, I think those were those mesovortices kind of reaching into that eye and wrapping around, and as those come through, those violent winds would come ripping through.
So I just want to remind folks one more time that are watching this, we have the chat there. You can see it in the bottom of the screen. Get your questions in. I'm going to soon start to ask Aaron some of your questions. This is your opportunity to ask a storm chaser anything you'd like to, especially one that just went through a historic hurricane and had to deal with quite a lot. So Aaron, let's keep talking here about the eye wall here. We fast forward a little bit more, just a few hours later, of course, to 5 a.m. Your hotel room flooded out? What happened there?
Yeah, well, can I just take a step back? I just wanted to mention that in that eye, we did get that calmness in the eye finally, eventually, where we had probably about 30 to 40 minutes of calmness, where the building wasn't shaking anymore. You couldn't hear anything, completely still. It was outside. You could hear the crickets. You could see birds flying around. Likely those were birds that had got hung up either in the eye, or they were like, okay, maybe this is over and we can finally go fly around. In fact, we even had a bird that flew into the stairwell there at the hotel trying to escape the effects of the hurricane. And so during that 30 to 40 minutes sitting in there, at that point the roof of the hotel had already started leaking. But on the other side of the building for me, on the south end, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll be fortunate and I'll be able to stay the night here in this hotel room. That wasn't the case. It slowly, stuff started falling down from the ceiling, like the exit signs. The insulation was blasting out of the ceiling there and shooting down. There was a big pile in the hallway. It looked like snow. And water slowly started filling up. That was on the 4th floor. In fact, the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor, no flooding. They were fine. The 4th floor had probably 2 inches of water on it. I'm sure that water eventually made its way down to the other floors. And that hotel room is probably going to have to be gutted out. It's totally destroyed just from that. But that water started filling up, and so I wasn't going to stay there. I mean, I probably could have stayed there, but I didn't want to sit in 2 inches of water in the 4th floor.
I don't blame you in the slightest bit. So from there, what's your next move? Obviously, you need to go somewhere else, but as you touched on, you're losing cellular service. One of your phones is getting taken out. What's the next step from that? Of course, at this point, the sun is starting to come up too, so we're starting to finally see the damage from Laura as it made landfall. And of course, you shot a lot of that video. Take me through what it was like when the sun finally started to rise that morning?
Right. So my first, obviously the sun came up. I wanted to go get those initial damage images, and then my biggest priority actually was I wanted to get the cell service really bad so I could let everybody know I was okay, and then start getting some footage to you all into the world to be able to show what's going on here. But so my first, I got all my stuff out of that hotel room, and but I had to kind of take it in batches between winds because the winds were still blowing pretty hard at that point. And I wasn't really worried about, in a normal situation, if the hurricane hadn't just come through, those winds wouldn't have concerned me. But there was lots of sheet metal and stuff laying around everywhere, glass and all that. And so my biggest concern is that, it didn't take much then at that point for that debris to get picked up. And I didn't want to get cut by anything or get injured out there. I do carry, I have like blood clot trauma packs with me. I carry in case something like that happens for myself or for anyone that's else around me. But so in between those gusts of wind, I started moving my stuff to the car and got the car filled up. And at that point, my plan was like, well, I'm done with the hotel room being my home base to work out of. It's back to the Subaru. And at that point, it was still dark. It was 5 to 6 a.m. So I drove out, trying to maneuver around. Power poles are everywhere. Right outside my hotel room, there was a giant power pole that was knocked over and leaning over. Luckily, I was able to get underneath it and get out of that area, and I wanted to clear that before it blocked my escape route out of the hotel parking lot. So I got out, the first thing I saw were the two gas stations just down the road from me I had seen earlier. Their canopies were just shredded, sheet metal and signs, everything shredded everywhere. A building just across the street from me, they had a barn out front that had been flipped over and a concrete wall that had collapsed there. And I took a little left out of the hotel area there to right. I-10 was right there. I literally stayed, I was like 100 yards from I-10, and went over to I-10, and I actually sat underneath the bridge of I-10 for about half an hour, waiting for things to. After I'd shot a little bit, waiting for things to lighten up a little bit. It was still raining, and I did have a window blown out, and I didn't want rain getting in there, so I hid underneath there for about 40 minutes until I felt it was safe. To then, I didn't want to drive far. Before the light came out, because I knew that I-10 to my west, which was my plan to get the cell service, was going to be largely blocked by trees, and I wanted the daylight to be able to deal with that. And so once the light hit, shortly thereafter, I immediately started driving west on I-10 towards Vinton. And actually, if you looked at the MyRadar weather app through the day, the hours leading up, even like maybe 12 hours, I think the MyRadar weather app was calling the show in the center going right through Vinton, and then just before landfall it had shifted just a little east of Vinton, so probably like the very center I think went somewhere right halfway between Sulphur and Vinton. You got to that area just to the west there where the center went, that's where those strongest eye wall winds were at, and trees knocked down across I-10. I saw a semi was flipped over there. I don't know what he was doing, but I checked to make sure no one was in there, and there was no one in the semi. But I guess the semi tried to drive. I mean, I did actually, when I was at the hotel, I saw one or two semis try driving through on I-10 in the midst of the hurricane. I don't know what the heck they were thinking there, but obviously, you see what happens when a semi gets knocked over there. And finally, I got to cell service, and that's the first thing I did was I let my fiance, Michelle, know that I was okay, both on Twitter. Opened up my laptop and got into Messenger there and let her know I was okay. Then I let you all know I was okay, and then started sending.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we were glad to finally get that message from you, especially considering that, I mean, just looking at the damage here that we're seeing, right? It's pretty significant stuff. I want to pull up a video here that you sent to us. We were just running it there, where you're driving, and then we look over to the side, and we see this kind of smoke coming from a tall building. Governor of Louisiana eventually confirmed that was a fire at a refinery that led to a chemical leak as well. I mean, let alone the fact that you're dealing with all the damage and as you touched on, all of the wind damage. Now you're dealing with potential hazardous materials out into the open too.
Yeah, so that was this right here video of me driving along on this is I-10, probably about maybe a half an hour after I let everybody know I was okay. I immediately turned around and went back into the disaster zone. And when I left Sulphur, I probably would have been able to see this fire, but I didn't see anything. So it didn't start. This footage here of the fire is just after it had started, because you see there's no cars even on the interstate there. And my biggest concern was toxic fumes. And so I right before I entered that cloud, I took a deep breath and I held my breath as I drove through that cloud. Tried to hold it as long as possible until I got on the eastern side of that cloud, because who the heck knows what's in that. I know there's a lot of toxic chemicals that are produced and stored in this area of the United States, especially Louisiana. And so I held my breath as long as I could, and some of that smell lingered around still. And tried to take shallow breaths so I didn't get too much of it, but it smelled kind of like a chlorine type smell. I'd be curious to see what exactly it was. Maybe chlorine or plastic, I don't know. But either way, you don't want to be breathing that stuff. And I cleared that, and then that's when I got into Lake Charles then, and the damage in Lake Charles was shocking to see. I mean, I was shocked to see, more shocked to see 2 days ago that they hadn't boarded up all those windows in the downtown area. Less shocked to see that when I got down there that they were all blown out. I mean, that was what I was expecting to happen since they didn't board them up.
We have that video, too, of downtown Lake Charles there, the damage that you're describing. At one point, you were standing in front of a restaurant, Gigi, something like that, and you had mentioned that you'd seen it prior where it was perfectly fine. Not so much here in this video.
Yeah, so this one, if the Gigi's actually was one of the worst buildings I saw damage down there. So you see it's a solid brick building, but the roof on it collapsed. And not sure so that's Gigi's. When you look at the front of Gigi's, you're looking to the east, and if you look at the roof, it collapsed on that northeast corner of the building, right where the strongest hurricane winds were coming from when it, as it approached shore. They're wrapping around there, and they're going to be coming from that east-northeast direction. And that entire roof collapsed in there. See everything's all just destruction there. And that whole street, there wasn't a single building on that whole street that was boarded up, and they all pretty much took window damage. And then the window damage, the thing about the windows is the reason why you want to board up those windows is once those windows fail, then you let the wind in, and when the wind gets in there, that's when things just start ripping those buildings apart.
Yeah, as we talked about with Flash, their lead engineer, Daniel, at the beginning of hurricane season, he says it's called the effect, where you get all of this wind that's coming in through a large opening, whether it's a garage door. Here in Lake Charles, you can see again that with these windows that are blowing out, that wind gets inside and puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the building, of course, eventually resulting in that roof failure, as you touched on there. But it's just wild to see all of the debris, and as you mentioned, these really well-built brick buildings, but unfortunately the roofs just didn't hold up, it seems.
Yeah, totally. And part of that might be, a lot of these buildings, they keep those air conditioners up on top of the roof, and those things get blown around and knocked over. They might punch a hole in that roof, and then once you get that hole in that roof, that's when it just starts ripping it apart.
Wild stuff. So let's take a look here at some questions that have come in, Aaron. We've got some folks that are asking some stuff here. We've got someone saying, "Look at that smile, a man who likes his job," from Joyce there on Facebook. I mean, Aaron's been through some wild stuff. Here's a question for you, Aaron, on that note. How did this compare, going through a Category 4 hurricane, how did this compare to dealing with chasing tornadoes, as you've done recently?
Wait, sorry, I was reading the comments down here and I got distracted. Repeat that. Sorry.
No worries. Joyce said here that look at that smile, man who likes his job. I mean, it takes a very interesting person to want to put themselves right in it. Of course, you guys are professionals. You know exactly what you're doing when it comes to storm chasing, watching radar, the circulation, and staying away from the most dangerous part of this weather here and moving. That's pretty important too. But how did these intense winds compared to, let's just say, chasing a tornado, a severe thunderstorm? How does it compare?
So obviously with the chasing a tornado, I try to stay out of the tornadic winds. Those are, not only do you, like with hurricanes, you have strong winds, right? But with a tornado, you have strong winds, but then you have that gate to gate, that changing of directions. You get a hurricane force wind going one direction, and then on a dime, it switches and it's going the other direction. And that change in direction is really, it rips stuff apart badly. And you also have that upward lifting motion, rising motion inside those tornadoes. And so I try to stay out of tornado winds. Severe winds, supercell winds, I've been in some real potent straight line winds. and those can get from 60 to 100 miles an hour even. And so that's what and that can be a pretty harrowing experience. But these hurricanes, I mean, that's essentially what you're experiencing is that derecho that went through Iowa the other day, 100 mile per hour gusts, if not more. I think they even got up to 130 miles per hour. That's essentially what you're experiencing for an hour or two, is that type of force continually just beating on everything. And the thing is that you have the front of the eye wall, and those are generally the strongest winds in the hurricane. Is going to be that leading edge of the hurricane, the northern side of it, and it comes through and it's going to tear everything apart. And then you have the backside, and those winds are generally a little weaker, but the biggest difference is then you have all that debris that got ripped apart from the front side of the hurricane now being strewn and being a battering ram as the backside of the hurricane comes through. And so that's one of the biggest differences between this and a supercell or severe weather, is that you're getting it twice, right? You're getting it as it comes, and then you're getting it as it leaves where you're at, instead of just it blowing right over you.
All right, we've got another question here, Aaron. This is from Greg on Facebook. If the winds are strong enough to blow so many things around, why doesn't it blow your vehicle all over the place? He says he's always wondered this.
Yeah, so the vehicles are pretty heavy. I didn't see a lot of vehicles. The vehicles that I see get blown around are those high profile vehicles like semis, RVs, something that can really catch that wind. And those are the type of vehicles that you don't even want to drive those in a severe thunderstorm event. Passenger car, that's got a pretty low profile. And you think about it, those cars are made to go up to 120, 130 miles per hour. Not that anyone does, obviously, it's illegal. But those cars are made to be able to go those speeds. Therefore, they're able to handle their aerodynamics. So you point the vehicle into the wind, and they're not gonna go anywhere generally. It's gonna take winds probably 150 to 180 miles, probably closer to that 180 mile per hour level to start moving vehicles. But that being said, I did see some vehicles, like in Hurricane Michael, I saw vehicles get shifted so a little bit, but again, I think it takes more of that closer to 160, 170, 180 mile per hour winds to actually start moving vehicles. And the reason you get those vehicles in the moving in tornadoes, I think, versus hurricanes at a little bit lower winds, again, is that gate-to-gate change and that rising motion, letting that wind get up underneath the vehicle. And where that's not really, with the hurricane, that wind is coming down toward the ground and straight down and pushing down on the vehicle.
All right, Aaron, I got another question here for you. This one comes to us from Michael. Michael asks, how high did the water rise? Which is a great question. So where you were, did you see that storm surge? I would imagine you were probably pretty far away from that.
Yeah, I specifically kind of targeted that sulfur area that was just a little west Lake Charles, because and looking at the inundation maps, but also more important, the best intel I had was talking to the locals there in the day leading up to the event, and the sheriff asking about flooding and previous events, that were people that lived here where storm surge had happened. And that sulfur area was looked like it wasn't going to get any kind of storm surge. Even with the 20-foot predicted storm surge, I was highly confident that we were going to be fine there. Those swamps and those bayous and canals have an amazing ability to really absorb a lot of that water. I think when that weight of that water comes in, it starts pushing deeper into the ground, and it makes room for more water to come in. And that's what those swamps, that's why they're so important to save those swamplands along the coast, because they protect the inland areas from the surge and worse damage happening. And that's what they're there for, and that's why we should protect those things. But in sulfur, there was no surge at all. I saw zero surge, a little bit of flooding here and there from rain just collecting in low-lying areas. But it was, compared to Hurricane Michael, Michael had way worse flooding, and again, even Michael wasn't much surge. It was mostly just that rain piling up. But even Lake Charles, when I went into Lake Charles, I didn't see any evidence of a lot of flooding. Even right along the lake there, I think you showed some video earlier of there was like a gazebo that was still underwater a little bit. But looking at the ground to see where debris had been deposited, it was only maybe 100 yards off the water there did I see evidence of where it looked like the surge had come up.
Right. I mean, when the National Hurricane Center describes the storm surge as unsurvivable, that's not a word that they toss around all that often. So even for the professionals, the storm chasers, the real experts there, it's just not something to really mess around with. I mean, you don't want to put your life literally on the line to get video. It's just not
Right.
worth it in that
Right.
sense.
And just to touch on that, usually that unsurvivable surge is going to be that right along the coast there, like Holly Beach, Cameron, those areas. That's definitely, you're going to get hit by a 20-foot surge there, plus waves crashing down. And I mean, you probably could survive it, but you're going to, there's a high chance you're not going to survive it. And if you do survive it, if you're not ready for that and you weren't expecting that, what these storms can do, you go in there with naivety, you're going to be shell shocked for a while probably. I mean, it's going to be it's hell on earth for an hour or more there.
So I guess the next question here, Aaron, is what's next for you? I mean, I know you touched on at the beginning here of our interview. You've got to get a new phone, figure out somewhere to do that. What's next for you here? Considering you're not even in Louisiana, you're in Texas. You've had to drive all over the place, putting in a lot of miles over 24 hours.
Yeah, so that's like you said, my next step is go figure out, I gotta get some repairs done on the Subaru. I had an actual CD axle on my front right tire was going out, started going bad on the way down, and so that actually kind of hampered my ability to intercept the storm just a little bit. I had to be a little more careful, and I didn't want to push it, stay close to where the surge was going to happen. I wanted to stay well away from that, well in advance of it coming through, just so I didn't get stranded, or I'd probably be fine, but I didn't want to lose the vehicle. So I gotta go get that figured out, get a new window, get my phone fixed, and then it's looking on to what's the next storm, and I'd like to get home to my family first, and then figure out what the next storm to intercept is.
So I guess we can round things out here, Aaron, with this. What is something that you will remember? I'm sure with each weather event that you chase, that there's something, photographically that you can remember having witnessed it firsthand that you can say, I remember, blank, it was that. What is it about Hurricane Laura that you will remember most? What's the biggest takeaway for you? Someone who experienced things firsthand.
Yeah, so a couple of things probably, instead of just one. I was the first time I actually had ridden one out in a hotel. I generally tried to stay in the vehicle or try to stay out isolated on my own. I kind of like, it's when I get into those situations, I don't know, I just kind of it's almost like an out-of-body experience, and I kind of just focus on my task at hand and hyper-focused on the storm. And so I just like to kind of be on my own. So this was a little different for me this time, being around other people. And I actually kind of documented how they reacted, and other people that were there, that locals that had evacuated that hotel, and kind of documented that. So that stands out quite a bit to me. The winds, I've been in probably stronger winds with Hurricane Michael, and it was in the daylight, so it was hard to really see much. It stands out that the sounds, I had to use my hearing a lot to really understand what was going on with the storm, because it was hard to see anything with all the power going out. And then as far as an image, the image that stands out in my head is I was actually shocked to see all those windows on that Capital One building blown out. I saw that building before the storm, and there's a parking garage right next to it. I had actually considered that as an intercept location and getting in that parking garage. And then I saw those windows, and I was shocked to see that. I figure most of the windows, I think that's the only high rise maybe in Lake Charles, but I figured those windows would be able to handle, or they would put windows in that would be able to handle that force of wind. But I guess now, I guess even with debris, no matter what, even with the biggest, you get debris hitting those windows. And that's what it looked like, because if you look at the image, most of the windows were busted at a lower level. So I think debris was coming off of buildings nearby and it's on the side of that building. Well, that stands out.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for setting aside the time here to speak with us. I would imagine that it was a much-needed sleep overnight last night, but I would have to guess that you are definitely at a deficit for some sleep. So go get some coffee, go get some food, maybe get some more rest, and before you move things on. Again, thanks a bunch, Aaron. We really appreciate you taking the time to do this morning, and we will be following up with you here for the next big weather event. Remember, guys, if you want to follow Aaron or everything MyRadar, be sure to follow us on our social media channels. You can see them there below: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Aaron, is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we say goodbye?
Just make sure you're paying attention to the weather all the time. Be aware and keep that information up to date. Follow the directions that people tell you, local authorities tell you, and you'll stay safe.
Excellent. Wise words. All right, everybody, that does it for Storm Chaser Aaron Jayjack. I have been a meteorologist, Mike Linden. Big shout out to Matt pulling all the strings here behind the scenes. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday. Stay safe and stay dry. Remember, tropical depression Laura now working its way through the Ohio and Tennessee river valleys, bringing with it a lot of rain here over these next couple of days. So for people that live in that area, a good 2 to 4 inches of rain expected out of this with some strong winds. I mean, 30 miles per hour, at least right now. It's certainly not what Aaron went through, but regardless, it is certainly something to not just set aside. So again, from all of us here at MyRadar, stay safe and stay dry. We'll catch you in the next one.